Welcome to Direction Northeast. Hello, I'm Slater Teague. This program is a presentation of the Mass Communications Department of Northeast State Community College and is produced by students through the college's video production facilities. This edition of Direction Northeast is a visit with a person with a unique perspective on history. As a daughter of a communist dictator, she saw both his public and private sides. In just a moment, Direction Northeast talks with Alina Fernandez, the daughter of Fidel Castro.
Northeast State's a wonderful place to start your career in college, and the campus is beautiful, the teachers are one-on-one.
It was an excellent decision to come to Northeast State. I've learned so much coming here.
I love the school, and everyone is friendly here. This has been the best time of my life. I have really enjoyed being here.
I think if it hadn't have been for Northeast, then I wouldn't feel as happy and as driven if I chose another school.
Step by step, Northeast State is here to get you there. Enroll now at northeaststate.edu.
Ms. Fernandez grew up in a turbulent Cuba, living with the ongoing threat of invasion by American troops. She is a witness with a unique vision, not only of her father, and how the country changed after the revolution. Ms. Fernandez, welcome to Direction Northeast.
Thank you.
First, tell us, what are your earliest memories of your father?
Well, I think not much without him as a starter, because I was born 2 years after the before the triumph of the revolution, so it's an image that has been there forever.
What kind of relationship did you have with him at an early age?
Well, I usually saw him on TV for hours, and then suddenly he would jump from the TV screen to the living room. Those are basically my first memories of him, memories of a man that was able to be very tender, and as a matter of fact, master children game very well.
Okay. Well, how about, how did you see Castro, your father, as a citizen, as you being a citizen, attached from him being as a member of your family?
I think I discovered very early in life that you cannot have a double emotional standard, you know. So you are the daughter of somebody, or you are yourself. You are a Cuban, you become a mother, you are a student, you have your own experience. And in my case, I had to split that from the personal feeling, because the experience I was having as a Cuban were not satisfactory for me.
Right, yeah, tell us about how it was, how life was in Cuba before you left.
Well, in Cuba, everything is controlled. In Cuba, you get the feeling that you're asphyxiated because of the lack of freedom. And I felt uncomfortable since I was very young, that I had to do whatever they told me to do, that there was no place for personal initiative, that we had a mandatory life, never the chance to change anything, never the chance to decide for yourself. Everything in Cuba is traced for you. From the place you go to study, from the store you're going to get your food, from your future. It has a very limited top. And over that, you cannot go.
One of the memories you've talked about is you remember seeing on the television Mickey Mouse on there, and you saw that go from Mickey Mouse to public executions. What kind of emotional feelings, do you have towards that? That's kind of a large jump.
But again, I was very young. I was still wearing my diapers and my pacifier. And the only thing I can say is that I became very addicted to my pacifier, you know.
Right, I can understand.
And then Mickey Mouse vanished from the TV forever, so we had some Russian cartoons, silent, at the beginning to watch. It was a very big change. Believe it or not, even if you're an infant, you feel it, you know it, you go through that. But a child is able to adapt to almost anything.
Now, I know in 1993 you left Cuba. You actually wore a wig and bore false papers and ended up in Spain. What are some of your memories from your defecting from Cuba?
The feeling I remember is that I wasn't even scared. I was like frozen, and I felt like maybe somebody that is going to play all his fortune in a roulette in only one little piece. that's the way I felt. If things went okay, I would be able to accomplish a dream. If things were not, I was risking to go to jail, or which is worse, to some psychiatric facility, which is a luxury treatment when you're a dissident you get in Cuba.
Okay. In 1998, you wrote Castro's Daughter, your book. Tell us a little bit about that, and how has your life changed since you wrote that book?
I started writing about Cuba since I was down in Cuba, but the police came and took all the cassettes and records and papers. So it was something I had pending with the same publishing that I had signed the contract while I was down in Cuba. It had changed a lot of things. For instance, I've been unable to write again after that. It's been a very traumatic experience, at least for me. It's a little bit, I liked it, to be honest, and it's a little bit like walking around naked. It's not agreeable.
Now, you do have a radio show down in Miami, and I know you're connected with a lot of the Cubans that are down there in that part of the country. How do they feel about the change of power in Cuba?
Well, I think that we all know that basically nothing had changed, that this is the same family that is taking over, and nothing big really had happened in Cuba, and life had not improved at all.
Now, I know you've talked about in your book and publicly about reforms within Cuba. How do you see this happening?
The what?
Reforms in Cuba.
Exactly. I had to be a little more abundant about that. Fidel Castro has been sick for 6 years, and his brother, which is the chief of the army since the beginning, or from the beginning, took over. And that's why I said nothing basically had changed. These reforms are only very cosmetic. For example, now you have the right to work in certain jobs that before you couldn't do. Now you can be a self-employed in Cuba, for example, cleaning houses or gardening or doing plumbing jobs. Before that, you were not allowed to do those types of jobs. It includes, for example, babysitting. It includes disguise yourself as an habanero and get yourself a picture taken by a tourist and get paid for that. So it's not big change. Basically, you are not allowed to own anything.
Now, recently, in a lot of the Arab-based countries over towards the Middle East, there's been a lot of turmoil and a push for democracy. Do you see anything like that happening in Cuba in the future?
Not right now, and you know why? Because these revolutions or movement started thanks to the new technologies. Everybody's tweeting, everybody's on the phones, but in Cuba, people don't have that type of technology. A few people in Cuba have a cell phone, a few. You don't have internet access in Cuba, so people are unable to communicate to each other. Let's say we're going to be some place at some time and we're going to protest, which is what is happening in the Middle East. And what happened in Iran, for example, where people were so unsatisfied with the elections.
How do you feel that Cuba could go through a democratic?
I think it's a question of time. This family is getting to be more than 80 years old. They are not going to last forever. They're not immortals.
Right. So you do think eventually...
The Cuban Revolution is a very personalized process. It's based on Castro's personality and, by instances now, on his brother's personality.
Do you have any feelings towards when a possible democratic revolution may occur?
No. I cannot guess.
Do you see yourself ever as returning to Cuba? I know you defected, and that's generally frowned upon in countries like that, but I mean, even maybe after a democratic revolution, would you ever return?
Well, you're right. I don't feel right now to go back to a place from which I had to escape, and took me so many years to escape. But I think that maybe, and hopefully, because that way I will have something to do to help, maybe I'll find myself useful, and of course I will go back.
Well, how would you describe your father to any children or grandchildren?
I have a daughter, and she has her own ideas by herself. I don't know if I'm going to speak about it if I ever have grandchildren. That's a good question. I have to think about that.
All right. Now, what was it like being a Cuban living in Spain? Did anyone ever kind of look at you weird or say anything bad?
Oh no, Cubans are all over the world. There is a lot of Cubans. In fact, it's the second place where they gather the most after the United States, of course. And actually, I lived in Spain for a few years, but not exactly after I left. After I left, I spent 2 days in Spain and then came to America. And thanks to the media, by the way, I got my daughter here 15 days later. I arrived. So I went back to Europe a few years after I left here in the country.
Do you feel that they were more friendly to Cubans in that country or here in the United States where you live today?
The fact is that when I escaped in 1993, there was a president in Spain who was very friendly with Fidel Castro. So I was advised to come to America. And people that advised me, God bless them, were totally right.
Now, in Spain, how is that different as far as just people viewing you as it is in the United States, as opposed to any kind of form of prejudice?
Cuba has been a Spanish colony, and they always feel that they lost it to America. So there is a mixed emotion. Also, Fidel Castro is from a Spanish descendant, so somehow the Cuban situation in Spain is more confusing for them than here in America. You find a lot of sympathizers of Fidel Castro in Spain.